One of the arguments against the Quran in Islam is that the Quran has a historical error in the Quran, chapter 17, verse 1. Now, a lot of Christians have made this claim, but the person who is more prominent in making this claim, or the person who makes this claim over and over, is Sam Shamoun, and he says that the furthest mosque, Masjid al-Aqsa, didn't exist during the Prophet Muhammad's during the Prophet Muhammad's time. So there's an obvious historical or geological or geographical error in the Quran. So basically, Sam Shamoun gives references. So it's good that Sam Shamoun gives references. So I'll give him credit where credit's due. He always gives his references, so that's good. But what Shamoun fails to understand is that his references actually help prove that the Quran is not in any error here. So let me go to the first source he claims. The first source he cites in his articles is Ibn Sa'd, volume 1, pages 246 to 248, where a lot of people apostated or left Islam after the Prophet Muhammad said he went to Jerusalem, and from Jerusalem he went to heaven, then from heaven he went back to Mecca. Then the Prophet continued, I stood at Al-Hijr, visualizing Bait al-Mosque, and described its signs. Some of them said, how many doors are in that mosque? I had not counted them, so I began to look at it and counted them one by one and gave them the information concerning it. I also gave them information about the caravan which is on its way and its signs. They found them as I related. Allah Almighty, the Great, revealed, we have appointed the vision of which we showed thee as an ordeal for mankind. Ibn Sa'd said it refers to the vision of the eye, which he saw with eye to eye. So according to this source, the Prophet Muhammad, the Quraysh or the disbelievers of Mecca didn't believe that Prophet Muhammad actually went to heaven and or went from Mecca to Jerusalem and from Jerusalem to heaven and from heaven back to Mecca in one night. They said this man is crazy. And so a lot of Muslims were hearing that the Prophet Muhammad went from Mecca to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to heaven, and then from heaven to back to Mecca, left Islam because they thought it was crazy. Muhammad was crazy for saying this. But Abu Bakr remained firm in his belief in Islam, or remained firm in his conviction of Muhammad. So basically, God, according to Ibn Sa'd, volume 1, and Sahih Bukhari, volume 6, book 60, hadith 233, and Sahih Bukhari, volume 5, book 58, number 228. So according to these sources, the Prophet Muhammad, was given a vision, or when people didn't believe that Muhammad went to Jerusalem, Allah or God gave the Prophet Muhammad a vision, or he increased his memory, and the Prophet Muhammad described what was in Jerusalem at the time. So basically, we have to look at secular sources. Before we even get into what the secular sources say, the whole argument here, Shamoun's argument again, is that the Quran or the Islamic literature contains a obvious error here because there was no mosque in Jerusalem at that time. So obviously, whoever was writing the Islamic sources made a mistake here. This is false because Shamoun doesn't understand what Shamoun basically doesn't understand what the Arabic word mosque means. Now, a few years ago, I looked into this because I was kind of bothered by this claim. But I looked into this claim and I found a refutation of this claim. There's a really, really wonderful website called Islamic-awareness.org where it refutes this claim. Basically, according to Arabic linguistics, right? According to the Arabic language and the Arabic linguistics, the word mosque does not necessarily mean a physical building, right? A mosque doesn't necessarily mean a physical building. According to the Arabic language, a mosque is a place or a geographical region which one prostrates its head to, which one prostrates its head down to. So any land can be a mosque, right? So it doesn't mean that there's like there's like a physical building at a place which people refer to as a mosque. So that's the first thing that refutes Shamoun's argument, is that the Arabic word mosque does not mean a physical building. It means a place of worship. It means a land of worship. So we find this in Sahih Bukhari. We find this in Ibn Hajar's commentary on Sahih Bukhari, etc., etc. So I'm going to leave the link to that article below, where the Islamic-awareness.org team says that the word mosque means a land and not necessarily a building. So that's the first point. So that refutes Shamoun's point about, there has to be a physical mosque or the Quran's in error here. So that's the first thing. That's the first refutation. The second refutation is Shamoun's sources actually help prove that the Quran's not in error here. It's amazing. If we read Ibn Ishaq's book, pages 180 to 182, Ibn Ishaq's book, page 181 to 182, it says, the mosque at Makkah to the Masjid al-Aqsa, which is the temple of Athia. So basically, what the Prophet Muhammad saw was probably the temple of Aliyah. So the temple of Aliyah was a building or a sanctuary that had these doors and had these physical buildings that the Prophet Muhammad was probably saw on it, in his way when he went to Jerusalem, and probably what he saw in his vision when the disbelievers of Makkah didn't believe him, and Allah gave the Prophet Muhammad a vision. So that's the second point. So basically, when the Quran, chapter 17, verse 1, is talking about a mosque, it's not talking about a physical building. Mosque means a place, a land, or a place of worship. So that's the point, that the word mosque is not a physical building. It's a land. It's basically a place where you prostrate your head down to. So the Prophet Muhammad was probably describing the buildings in Jerusalem. And those buildings in Jerusalem match what was going on, what was in Jerusalem in the fifth century. So the Prophet Muhammad probably went to the Ezra and Miraj, the night ascension, probably took place, in 580 CE or something like that. And the Prophet Muhammad was describing the buildings that were there in the late 5th century or in the early 6th century, whenever the Ezra and Miraj took place, whatever year it took place in. So that's basically so this is basically the refutation, is that Shamoun doesn't understand what the Arabic word mosque means. And the second point is that there were physical buildings in Jerusalem in the 5th and 6th centuries. So what that means is that the Prophet Muhammad was describing the buildings in Jerusalem at that time. Regardless, the Quran chapter 17 verse 1 doesn't have an error, and the Islamic sources don't have an error. The link to that article is below.